Okay, and then the rest of us are putting away all phones and computers and everything and participating in the activity.
Kylie, I like the pants.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Here, give me announcements of paper, so here's your guys's. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. This is your identity. Alrighty, so here's yours.
Yes.
And then this is for Ella.
Oh, yeah, I can show it.
Yeah. That one's for her. Yeah.
Okay, Ella, this is your identity. I'm gonna write it.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Yeah. I saw like the first part. That's like the main thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the chat. Oh boy. Okay.
Okay, if you are in the white class, go over there. Oh, sweet. If you are in the black class, go to this side.
Okay, goodbye, Ella. I'm gonna leave you over there.
I'm white.
How's it feel being white, you guys?
Good.
Now put yourself kind of in a line so that the white rich male should be the farthest to this side. Following then should be the white poor male and then white rich female. And then middle class black male should be farthest to this side. And then the black female should be farthest.
Ella's the white poor male.
Yeah.
So if I'm black poor female, I'm all the way.
Yeah.
Wait, what are you guys?
Housewife.
Oh, you go over there, silly goose.
Then
You're a woman.
Yeah,
you're
go over
down
there,
with
woman.
us. Oops, sorry.
Nice.
Alright. Nice to meet you.
And you guys are gonna get points based on how you
Hello. I'm a white man.
simulation. So you better do your best.
Oh, goodness. Oh, yeah.
All right, well, we're first gonna start off with a question, and that question is water wet? So,
Raise your hand, tell us, what do you think? Is water wet?
No.
Yes,
You think it's wet?
it's what?
No, it's not. Put your hand down.
Tell us why. Tell us why water.
Because liquids are classified as wet. Therefore, water being a liquid is wet.
But is lava wet?
Yes.
No.
No. Ella, you say no?
No. Water being wet is like saying sand is sandy. You don't have to say it, and it feels more like a verb versus a describing word.
Okay. Emberly, what do you think?
The way you describe things is really subjective, especially to our species. Like other species wouldn't have to describe it. So yeah, I'm with Ella. You don't really need to say that it is, but it is wet because that is the characteristic that we gave it.
Okay, and you're the white rich male, right?
Yes.
So you're right. 100%.
Nice.
We're going with Emberly's opinion on this. Emberly, I'm gonna give you 500 points, okay?
Wow, great.
Hot.
But Dr.
Ella.
I'm gonna give you -50.
oh, okay.
Ellie Rose, I hate to break this to you. You're a woman, so.
Yeah, you are a woman. You don't get a voice.
So now I'm gonna have everybody stand on one foot.
At least I'm a rich housewife.
But you guys on this side, you can't just stand. You have to jump around while you're standing on one foot. But if you guys need to hold on to the desk, you can do this.
Can I sit on the desk?
Whoever goes the longest wins.
Nice.
Oh, brother.
No. Oh. But you guys can if you'd like to.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm still going, bro. Thanks.
Are you guys doing okay over there?
Oh, no.
It's a little bit rough, but I think we'll manage.
They said I could. I have
Yeah,
privilege.
I can.
See that? Oh my God.
Privilege. Is this what privilege feels like? Is this what privilege feels like? The Asians have finally gotten privilege. We got this.
Shut up. I'm getting trapped. I guess
You still standing? I'm a spell. I have really bad posture.
Of course.
And then Ally Rose, let's get Ally Rose.
Heart. Yeah, let's do it.
What's her role?
She's a
I'm a
housewife.
rich housewife,
Oh, yeah.
white female.
Honestly, that is like the most.
Ally Rose, realistically, how much do you like your husband, and are you willing to leave him because I'm kind of poor and I'm looking?
No, you're poor. Wait, are you my wife or are you Everly's wife? Asian gang. Crazy rich Asians. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Crazy rich Asians.
Why did they get, why did that?
I'm so unmotivated.
Oh.
Yeah.
she's here, and she's sitting there, and she's cheering them on. Oh.
Yeah.
Ella, were you standing on one foot at home?
Oh no.
She was cheering us on.
I think it's so exciting. Okay, now we're going to play Simon Says. So everybody's saying that. I think it does. Are you freaking kidding me? Yeah, I know where you live and.
Okay, minus a D right there. Wanna talk again? What? You wanna talk again? I'm not used to being on this side of the room.
Okay, Simon Says, raise your right hand.
Oh, which one's right?
Left and my right.
I literally just
I'll
checked
just
my
give you
hands.
50 points. Did you even say Simon Says?
She said, I think so.
I really did. Are you? There's a whole lot of Okay, Simon Says do 2 jumping jacks.
No. Kidding.
Oh,
Is that a 0?
Simon Says, spin in a circle. Sit down. You get to sit down.
That is not how the game works.
I think that they're just smarter than how they.
Okay, we're starting. Take over this room.
I'm a wife.
America has not enacted gun control, so.
Okay, now, if you are a woman,
morning.
sit down.
If I'm an atheist.
If you're a woman, because you don't get to play.
Haha, loser.
Shut up.
You don't get to play anymore. You're not cool enough to play. You're right. For being a woman, you do get points. Because you shouldn't be a woman in this society.
Yeah, you should. Women aren't equal. They shouldn't be. I'm just kidding.
Just say.
Like, we can get our points from our men. Protect us and watch over us.
You know how many freaking women or dishwasher jokes I make in history? It's so funny. Like, I need to stop. Dr. Borg, I make it like satirical. You can ask Andres about it. He thinks it's very fun.
About what?
About me making women or dishwasher jokes.
Oh.
I make them all the time. It's really funny.
And then.
I'm not doing it for us.
Hey, you know what? Okay, now if you're still standing, raise your left hand. Simon Says to raise your left hand. did it wrong. It's supposed to be my left.
You're out. Sorry.
You're out of the game, sorry, sit down.
Musician's mad.
Hey, congratulations, white males. You guys won the game. You guys are amazing. Yeah. Everybody give them a round of applause.
Yeah.
Great. Next up. We won. Okay.
I beat you, Ellie Rose, because you are a woman.
Okay. Now we're gonna play I Spy. Okay, and if you're a woman, you still can't play.
Sweet.
Because we say something.
Oh,
Okay, I spy with my little eye a picture of a woman that also has red fiber.
Blanche.
Good job, you guys. You guys did great. They saw it. Why didn't you see it?
Oh my god.
I don't like this game.
Okay, I spy with my eye something that blue and black. I'm not green, I'm yellow.
Green and black? How dang are you trying to be?
Green and black, it's a picture.
Okay.
I did that. It's okay. You guys tried at least. I mean, you guys are close. So.
Wait, what was it?
That, but you guys, we're.
Oh,
Was there? I think it's pretty close. So, yeah, you guys get close.
Oh.
I was like, on the opposite
Is mine
side.
5 million? Oh. It's 300,000.
Oh,
Nice.
illiterate too? Ooh, that might.
I just want to go. I don't want to make last song.
Me neither.
Okay. So now we're gonna discuss what just happened.
Okay.
Racism.
Who won the game?
Yeah.
Oh, my Harvard title.
And I think the kind of that was
I am a woman. You wish you were a woman.
What just happened?
Apparently.
Who won the game?
Not being a woman.
Golf, like golf. Exactly. Okay.
Never.
So what was this about? Why were we being so nice to them, but so mean to you guys?
Racial.
White.
Well, why were
Oh,
there some
and
games that Allie Rose, Miss Laura, and Brooklyn couldn't play that everybody else?
It's a white man's world.
Glad Sam's not here.
And so, our section is that. And so we wanted to put you back in the mindset of back when.
Back when?
Yeah, back, and then put it back to, because now it's so different and women can't speak out and it's not as much division, but we wanted to help you guys get into that post-school thinking of why certain characters act certain ways and why there's like family are so masculine and so toxic to
We just wanted to demonstrate that not only was it a racial injustice, but there's also a lot of genders in this hierarchy, that even though Allie Rose may be a white female, she still wasn't getting as many points as the white males, and still wasn't able to play as many games. And so the racial, like, it's not just racial, there's a lot of gender as well.
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask, can you guys like leave any instances in the play where you guys saw that? Like the gender equality?
When they were playing poker? Yeah, poker. And like, the women were trying just to listen to music or like play with them, and we were like, no. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Ooh, when Stanley got drunk and threw the radio out the window, and all of his guys were like,
Oh, Stanley, he needs some water. He needs some coffee. Let's put him in the shower.
What if that happened too?
disgust.
Yeah. What is it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was gonna be the one that I was gonna talk about, yeah. So, yeah, I just noticed that a lot throughout the play where, even if it was just small comments, there was a lot of just like gender inequality, and there's a couple of things that like Mitch even said, I can't really remember though, but, you know, just like suggesting that guys had a little bit more power than females at the time.
And then the other thing they kind of talked about was not just that, but also like economically, like there's hierarchies as well. And we see that kind of a lot with the book because it calls Stanley a Pollock as well. So even though he's still a white male, you can still see that he isn't even as high on hierarchy, and yet he still has some power. Still isn't the highest, and so there's so many different hierarchies throughout the book, whether it's social or racial or gender. There's a ton, and it really plays out and how characters interact.
There's a couple of instances of this that I want to point out. The first one is just on the very first page of the play. Let's actually go back to our seats, because I want to build on what you just said. You guys are done with your activity, right? Okay.
I will carry you, Ella, even though you insulted me.
You can come up here and look at me. I
You
would love
insulted
that.
me.
Thank you for carrying.
I hate you, Ella. Right here?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I gotta close the door. Don't worry, I'm still recording it. Still be accountable. Only with context.
Oh, I loved your guys' thing. I thought that was a lot of fun.
It's okay, we're used to it.
Should we clap? We didn't clap. That was a
Oh, yeah.
transition. Well done. Thank you for making this exercise, especially. Okay. So go to the first page where we are introduced to Stanley. It's just page 4 of the book. Okay. So this is crude. There's a lot of crudeness in this play that we might not catch all the time because we don't have the 1940s vernacular. Like it's like if we were living in 1947 when this play was written, and I had to look that up because I didn't remember either. When it was written, if we were watching it then, we would pick up on this really quickly. But because we're watching it in 2021 and we have our own slang, we don't necessarily pick up on their slang. But the beginning of this is important. Stanley and Mitch, I don't know how to say this nicely, are throwing a package of meat back and forth to each other. And basically it says, so Stanley carries his bowling jacket and a red stained package from a butcher's. Stella comes out from the first floor landing, a gentle young woman about 25 in a background obviously quite different from her husband. So we get that social inequality right from the very beginning, right? And then it says, don't holler at me like that. Hi, Mitch. And then Stanley yells, catch. And Stella says, what? And Stanley says, meat. He heaves the package at her. She cries out in protest, but manages to catch it, then laughs breathlessly. Her husband and his companion have already started back around the corner. He's throwing his meat around. That's the way that you have to think of that in a really crude way, right? I know, it's gross, but that's basically how we are introduced to Stanley. One, he's extremely masculine, like he is in the action of like throwing something, right? And which is like, you know, he throws like a man, not like a girl type of idea. He's throwing it at his wife and she catches it breathlessly. And it's like, gross. Like we are introduced to him like with this blood-covered package of meat, and it's obviously a stand-in as like a phallic symbol, you know? So this is really important to Stanley's character right from the very beginning. This is a man, and he is committed to being a man. And I'm saying it that way on purpose. Like he is performing the act of manliness in this scene. Here he's like roughhousing with the boys, coming down the street, throwing a package of meat at his wife. Like he is in a public space performing. And the way that he's performing is crude, but it's also like overt, and like no one can question like this is a man right here. And then she is like, hey, where are you going? And he says, bowling. And I hate and love this answer. She says, can I come watch? So not like, I want to go bowling with you, right? Like, oh, let's go bowling together, fun date night. No, it's, can I go watch you bowl? Which, I mean, it feels appropriate for the 40s. It's not like, but women were bowling. Women were bowling since the very beginning. That's never been like an activity that is solely for males, you know? But in this relationship, Stanley does the actions and Stella watches. It reminds me of like a boyfriend who's like playing video games and the girl's just like serving him snacks, you know, one of those. And he says, come on. So he's just like happy to have her come and like sort of watch his performance then of manliness. And that's kind of what she's there for in this scene, is to watch that performance and to like kind of witness that he is a man. Because without her, then he can't perform. Like you can't perform your gender and perform manliness if there's nobody there to watch you, because then it would just become like, I don't know, sad. To have a good performance, you've got to have an audience, right? And then the other part that I want to point out that these guys were talking about is on page 17. I debated whether I should point out that meat thing. I debate it every year that I teach this, and I always end up pointing it out. I don't know why, because I just want to get in trouble, I guess. Okay, so here at the end, Blanche says, will Stanley like me, or will I be just a visiting in-law, Stella? I couldn't stand that. You'll get along fine together if you'll just try not to, well, compare him with men that we went out with at home. And Blanche says, is he so different? And Stella says, yes, a different species. Blanche says, in what way? What's he like? And then Stella says, oh, you can't describe someone you're in love with. Here's a picture of him. So what stands out to you in that section? Like we talked about gender difference being like very forefronted in the play. How about social difference in that section? Yeah, Brooklyn.
I think the way that Stella like even just refuses to describe him like says a lot about that maybe she knows deep down like that this isn't the best situation, and she's just warning Blanche like, don't try and talk me out of this. And she's like, you can't describe someone you're in love with. She's like almost like justifying it to herself.
Okay, good. And that suggests that there has to be something to justify, right? That she knows that this relationship is somehow wrong, and that it will be wrong in Blanche's eyes. So she's not going to go there. She's just going to make sure that Blanche knows I'm in love with this person. I've got this connection that can't be broken no matter what you say. Yeah, Lyra.
So you know how people like date people that look like them?
Yeah.
And like that's usually what relationships will work out if they look like each other.
Yeah.
Because like I think being from a different social hierarchy, that Stella and Stanley obviously have different fundamental values, and she's working really hard to cope to like blend in with his values, and he doesn't care about hers at all. And so Blanche, like I think she's warning Blanche about this, because Stella knows herself that they are so morally different. They have such different like morals that like even she can see, but Blanche even more so will see that they are not.
Yeah, and instead of the word morals, I like the word values here, because I'm not sure that their morals are so much different. They definitely, at this point when they're talking about it, she is like saying our morals are kind of different, right? Later on in the play, we can decide whether or not that becomes true. But they are definitely talking about how our value systems are completely different from each other. And then she says that makes us a different species, which I think is fascinating, because is she saying then that we, Stella and Blanche, are the human species and Stanley is something else? Think about how often in this play, one of these women refers to Stanley as something other than human. It's quite often. he's a brute, he's a pig, he's all sorts of different kinds of names. And what's interesting here is it's not Blanche that says they're different people or different species, it's Stella. Stella says, yes, a different species. And she kind of uses this as like a kind of intro to saying, and I love him, you know, like I love this different species, this guy. And later in the play, we hear Stanley say, you loved when I took you down off those white pillars, you know, like you liked, you know, slumming it type of an idea. And here Stella's kind of like admitting like, yeah, we are different than each other. And that's why I like him kind of a thing. Yeah.
But like later in the play, Blanche was like, oh my gosh, he's literally a Neanderthal. He's like,
yeah.
in front of
Right.
the cave with his other buddies. And she's like, no, he's perfect. He's a gentleman.
Yes, right. What do you want to say about that? Just makes you mad.
Yeah, because like first Stella's the one who's like, oh, he's just a different species. And then Blanche points it out and she's like, no, he's not. He's a perfect gentleman to me all the time.
Yeah, it's kind of like how someone can't talk bad about your sister, but you can talk about her all day long about how awful she is. Yeah, it's that kind of an idea. And it's also this kind of class alignment then, and who you should be loyal to. And Blanche clearly thinks that Stella should be loyal to Bellerive and loyal to their kind of like Southern Belle upbringing. And Blanche always is referencing like Stella's pedigree, like Stella for star, you know, and trying to make it seem like she's, you know, she's from this very fancy background, so she should maintain that and live up to that name. And yet here's Stella saying in that section that Kylie's talking about, no, I'm going to align myself with this working class pole instead, you know. And go to one page earlier, page 16. Oh my God, and on this page, there's two, what is it called, stage directions I want you to see. So like at the top of the page, Blanche and they look at the apartment and it says they both laugh uncomfortably. Here, I'll go one section before that. Stella says, it's just incredible, Blanche, how well you're looking. And then they both laugh uncomfortably. But Stella, there's only 2 rooms. I don't see where you're going to put me. We're gonna put you in here. Blah, 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 blah. Stanley, will it be decent? And Stella answers that by saying Stanley is Polish. So this kind of goes later to that same, like, he's a different species. He won't be uncomfortable because he's Polish. And so he doesn't have, like Allie Rose, these same value systems that you and I have, right? And Blanche says, oh yes, they're something like Irish, aren't they? And Stella says, well, and at this point, the Irish are just becoming what we would say in race studies lately is they're just becoming white. Before the turn of the century, Irish people, you'd see signs on stores that said no Irish allowed, you know, like they were segregated, they were seen as not part of the white race, white European race. By the 1940s, they were kind of more integrated into communities. And so it's kind of like there's something like Irish is kind of like saying like, they're not quite us with our Southern pedigrees, but like Irish, right? And Stella says, well, and then Blanche says, only not so highbrow. And she kind of is saying it as like a joke, because if the Irish are considered like lesser than, calling them highbrow would be calling people lesser, like, you know, it's like saying, like sarcastically calling them highbrow. And then they both laugh again in the same way. And I want to point out the way that they're kind of co-conspirators here. They're both laughing at these racial differences, of racial, I don't even think we call that, ethnic differences, right? They're both laughing at the idea of like denigrating the Irish and saying like, oh, they're so highbrow, the Irish, you know, like basically aligning themselves with each other, like we are these 2 Southern women, and so we can make fun of these other groups, even though this is the person that Stella is married to, which is supposed to be one of the greatest forms of alignment you can have. Like the most loyalty you can have is supposed to be to your spouse, and yet here it's not that. It's not that. Okay, so thank you for the good activity. I just wanted to point us to a couple sections in the book to look at along with your activity. Let's prepare for the next part of class. So for all of this play, we're going to be doing more group discussions. I'm going to have us probably have Emberly just move to the back desk, and then everyone will just sort of turn their desks towards each other. But we're going to have like circle discussions where you guys are in charge of our conversations. So to get us started with that, I need you to write, and let's do this on my paper. We need to write some central questions that you might be able to discuss for this one. We haven't talked about central questions since Crime and Punishment, probably. Do you remember how much time we spent in Crime and Punishment figuring out what the topics are in this book and what kind of questions the book is asking? You wouldn't remember that part. Okay, so the way that we talked about this, and this is just a little review. When we did this, I had you listing all of the different topics that you think that the book is talking about. And remember, we're focusing on scenes 1 and 2 here. So I think this group pointed out a few here: class differences, gender differences, racial differences, right? And so we know that those are 3 major topics at the beginning of this book. What are some other major topics that we want to throw down here that we might want to discuss in our group discussion? Yeah, Dale?
How branches kind of.
Ah, good. Passive aggression. Okay, good. What other topics? Yeah.
Maybe like justification or excuse. I don't know.
Yeah.
How to.
That's good. Any major topics you want to throw around? Bowling. Yeah, Dale?
Stanley like knows a lot of people, like when he was talking about the papers that Branch had.
Yeah.
Oh, I know so and so. They can.
Oh, I like that.
I know so.
Yeah, like, so let's have questions then about community and like, kind of like having hookups, you know?
Full possession,
Possession, I like
like
that.
how Blanche kind of owned that place, and Stella was saying that she kind of owned it too, even though she abandoned it, and then Stanley was saying that by association he owned it.
Yeah, did anyone look up the Napoleonic Code? The Napoleonic Code was a series of laws that were supposed to be like in line with like the French Revolution, so like libertad, equality, all that stuff. But the part of the Napoleonic Code that really went against that was that they were making sure that that was only available to men. And so there was the Napoleonic Code said women can't own property, women can't, once they enter into a marriage, the man actually takes on ownership of the property, they can't get credit and loans and that kind of stuff. Okay.
I don't know how to phrase this, but like being like acceptance of men making like really sexual and like crude jokes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's do sexuality and then let's do perversity or crudeness. Or should we call it sexual harassment?
Yeah, call it what it is.
2 R's, 2 S's, right?
Yeah.
I know what it is, but I can't spell it. Okay. Yeah, Angelina. Substance abuse, okay. Substance. So like the alcohol, substance abuse and physical abuse. And should we put mental up there too?
Like privacy and boundaries.
Mhm.
Like gender roles, so like
Yeah.
femininity and masculinity.
Okay, I like that. So gender, but also masculinity and femininity. Specifically, and up here, because I've been using this word and I'm going to continue to use that word, I'm going to put the word performance up here, although that goes with Dalen's point about passive aggression too, I think.
I think there's a lot about like cleanliness. With how much people do.
Yeah.
Kind of disgusted, like depression.
Good point. Okay, if you think of other topics you'd like to discuss, then you can for sure write questions about those. But basically, our next step now is to choose about, well, you could be obsessive about this. If you wanted to have 5 questions about possession and ownership, you could. But you're going to write 5 questions that try to get at the truth of the novel in these topics. So you're trying to write 5 questions that you don't know the answer to. That makes a good question. I'm not totally sure what the answer is. But you're going to try and write 5 questions then that will lead to interesting discussions for this novel. So let's do one. I'm going to do, I haven't. Okay, I'll just do a simple one. How much of gender is performance in this play? Right, so that's gonna be my central question. I'm not really sure what the answer is. There isn't one single answer. It's gonna probably be different for everybody else, but I want to talk about like whether or not their performance is genuine, like they've internalized it, or whether or not it's like just completely a kind of manipulation to get other people to do what you want. Okay, does that make sense? Writing 5 questions then, 5 discussion questions, kind of like this that are a little bit vague to get everyone talking.
So are these questions like the ones that are like completely, they're like themes where it's like it doesn't actually talk about the play and the questions that the play refers to it, or is it like about the play?
For this kind of a question, it can be both. It can be thematic like this one, but it could also be like how much of Stanley's gender is performance. It could be specific because ultimately it will get us to themes, but the discussion is going to be very centered on the book. What I don't want though is like, what is the main character's name in this book? You know, something like that. Okay. All right. I'm gonna give you like 5 minutes to write your discussion questions. I'd like you to try to get 5 of them. That's a lot in 5 minutes, but let's try and get 4 of them. And Ella, if you would write your discussion questions in the chat box. And again, it could be 5 questions or 4 questions about one of these topics that you're especially interested in, or it could be all over the board. Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, I like that question too. Ella's got a good one. Okay. All right. Hopefully you have around 4. If not, that's okay. But we're going to have our discussion now. So I'm going to play a larger part in this discussion than I will in the future. I'm hoping by the end of this play, we'll do one of these every day and you will basically be running it completely without me. But just so you know, I sometimes can't help myself. And this time I will talk a lot. So let's all kind of face each other. So Emily, if you'll go to the very back. And then everyone turn your desk so that we're like facing the center of the room. We don't have to make a real circle. We can have desks in the middle, but this will work. And Ella, you can talk when you want to. You'll be able to hear us, I think, and we can hear
Okay.
you definitely. Yeah. Okay. So everyone that for this also needs to keep their paper in front of them and their pens. So your prompts from now on are all about the discussions we are having as a class and all about the notes that you're taking during these discussions. So one thing I really want to help with this is our ability to kind of like glean insight from our classmates. This is like how the ideal college seminar would go once you're into those like higher level classes. You'll have classes, hopefully, of no more than like 15 people. Everybody will be around a table and you'll be discussing the books rather than having somebody like lead the discussion. And one thing I think like a mistake that undergraduates will make sometimes is not paying attention to what people are saying. So instead you're like sitting there in your head, like trying to think of what's the next thing you're gonna say, you know, or you're zeroing out everybody else and only paying attention to your professor because you know they're the ones who make the tests, you know, so you're writing down what the professor says, but not necessarily what your peers say. You guys are gonna have to write a essay about this book. And what your peers say is going to be just important to this discussion as what I say. Maybe a little less important than what I say. But so as people are talking, you're going to take kind of notes on what people say. This is like a space where everything you say can be up for grabs. So like, you know, well, you're not going to publish this paper, so I hope nobody is going to hold too many ideas close, but you're going to be generous with your different ideas and sort of like let people steal them and claim them as their own, because then people are going to build those ideas and they will become their own. So as people talk, taking notes, because then your prompt for next time is going to be like, what are your most insightful notes from the conversation? Okay, cool. So who wants to start us off with their question? Okay.
Do you think the reason why Stanley looked into knows so much about the code because he had looked into it earlier?
This is a way to kind of track people.
Yeah.
So anyone can just respond at any point. You don't have to raise your hand or anything like that.
I think it has a lot to do with property and ownership. He wants to feel like in the relationship he has the upper hand and he knows like these things that when she is like doing something that he doesn't agree with or like not telling him things, then he can pull out these like things. It's almost like a contract, like by marrying me you agree to tell me these things, and just kind of like almost it makes me think of like like signing a waiver, like an unspoken.
I think that was a yawn. Okay, yeah. No.
I think like this is like he's like the epitome of masculinity, and like this like a weakness would be like feminine or whatever, and him like knowing about this, it shows like his own weakness and insecurity in himself, and he tries to be like the strong one, the one, but like having a contract like you said, keeps him in this position of what it actually looks like.
That's super interesting to me because like a contract suggests that you wouldn't be able to keep full control over it without the help of the law. Like if you were a real strong masculine man, would you really need the law to say that your wife's property is also yours? No, you just take what you want, right? That's kind of like the masculine concept. But here he's like, no, I gotta rely back on my knowledge of this like contract. That is interesting.
I feel like that reflects something about society back then, because men are always saying like, well, obviously we're like superior women, but they had to like make these laws. And like, I think that his knowledge of them is more of like, I don't know, it kind of reflects more on like his right as a white male rather than like his education about it. I feel like all men would just know that because of course they're way better, but like they had to make that.
So it's like this irony between what should be just inherent if you actually are better, but that you have to make sure there's structure in place to maintain that. Yeah.
I think it kind of shows that he's insecure because he came from this like higher up social class. And so I feel like he feels like he needs to be on par with her. And so he needs to find to basically own what she owns because he feels like he's on a lower social class than her. And obviously Stanley can't have that. He can't be on a lower class than somebody else. And so he needs to find a way to like be better than her. And so he knows a lot about the Napoleonic codes. Be on par with her, so he's less insecure, I guess.
Yeah. That section of the book too is when they're about to go, I'm open to it, they're about to go to Galatori's, which is like a really fancy restaurant in New Orleans. Like fancy, like they'll wear like tuxedos to serve you and have the wine list and stuff like that. And he's like, no, I don't want to, I'm not going to no Galatori's for supper. So it's like he rejects the fanciness of their life, but then the next page is when he's like, what's yours is mine and what happened to the gallery. So I like this idea that it's like revealing his insecurities about not being on the same level with her. Do we want a new question? Someone else? Anything that builds off that question? Yeah.
One question that I had was, does the play claim that domestic violence is a personal issue or one to be dealt with by?
I think that like I think that the key argues that it's an issue to be dealt with by the community because Stella on her own, like she would have never no, she still never realized like she was really in a bad position. And only through like her community, like kind of and like the policeman, like and just like whenever like he would yell and then people would come out and like see stop, like the community seeing that this is wrong and then like made her know this is wrong and what is going on is wrong. And if she was by herself, she would have never like even thought about it, I think. So I think it does argue that.
I think that it makes it so that it's like a community issue, but it also kind of makes it seem less of an issue and more just like a common occurrence, I guess. Because like with Eunice and Steve, it's just kind of like oh yeah, they do that like when like or whatever. Or like Stanley and Stella were both like oh yeah, they do that. And so or like the way that Stella could just like go up to Eunice's house makes it seem like that happens a lot. So it seems like less of an issue and more just like oh yeah, it happens sometimes.
It's kind of like outsiders and insiders to the community. Outsiders to the community that Ellie Rose is talking about come in and point out that this isn't normal, but the whole community has normalized it by like providing shelter, but not like stepping in.
I think it's what the differences of how Stella and Eunice both react to like seeing these things because like Stella when when she hears like Mimi's like screaming and stuff, and she just kind of says like, oh, they're having trouble again or something, but like Mimi, she'll like usher like Stella in her room and tell her like you need to leave. So it's just maybe it's part of like Stella doesn't want to interfere with Mimi, so that in a way is acknowledging that what is going on is wrong, and she knows that she's innocent. I don't know.
Yeah, you don't want to like admit that. You don't want to admit that someone else is what they're doing is wrong if you're doing the same thing. Yeah, that makes sense.
That issue also comes up at the end of the book, and like I believe that before Blanche left, she told Stella like that Stanley raped her, didn't she? And so
She hints at it so strongly that everyone knows what's going on. Yeah.
And Stella still goes back to Stanley
Mhm.
and just kind of tries to ignore it. And so I feel like there's a lot of denial there, and it could be because even though she pretends that she's an insider, she's still an outsider at heart. She was like raised in the South, but I feel like there's a lot of things.
Oh, yeah, the ending is much different in this play than it is in the movie, isn't it? Did you guys notice that? It's like, the movie version is like, she's getting out, like, oh, I'll never again see you. And we can be pessimistic about that in the movie. I think it'd be naive to assume that Stella's about to leave Stanley, she's said stuff like that before. But in the play, it's very clear that Stella's going to stay. And so it's her trying to like, make herself feel like she is finding a way to be an insider through abuse then. Yeah. Okay, let's go to a different question. There's not too much about the abuse in scenes 1 and 2, and I'd still like to keep focusing on 1 and 2. Yeah, Kylie.
Is substance abuse more of a masculine or feminine?
Fascinating question. What do you guys think?
Although I feel like it's more known out there, but then like also if you know about Blanche,
Yeah.
and so it's more hidden and secret, so on nerves, but like men are more disposable with it. I think it says that like also women.
Let's like look at that in the actual text. So look on page 14. So remember when Blanche first gets into the house, the first thing she does, she's there alone, she finds the liquor bottle and she takes a shot. And then Stella comes into the room and Stella pours her a shot. And then they're talking, and Stella on this page, on page 14, says, won't you have another? And Blanche says, no, one's my limit. So the first thing we hear Blanche talk about alcohol, she's lying about it right from the beginning, right? And then I'm trying to find, then look at page, let's keep going with that. Stella says, sure. Blanche says, you haven't said a word about my appearance. Stella says, you look just fine. It says, God love you for a liar. Daylight never exposed so total a ruin. But you put on some weight. Yes, you're just as plump as a little partridge, and it's so becoming to you. And later we find that she's pregnant, but Blanche is kind of getting a dig in there. Like Daly called it passive aggressive, right? Go to page 26 then. And compare the way Blanche is talking about alcohol to the way Stanley does. Stanley crossed to the closet and removed the whiskey bottle. He's just talking casually about what Laurel is like. And then he says, liquor goes fast in hot weather. He holds the bottle to the light to observe its depletion. He says, have a shot? And she says, no, I rarely touch it. And Stanley says, some people rarely touch it, but it touches them often. And Blanche says, ha ha. And Stanley says, my clothes are sticking to me. Do you mind if I make myself comfortable? And takes off his shirt in front of her. So I think that goes, like, this comparison really speaks to Angelina's point that they're both drinking a lot. But Blanche is pretending that she's not drinking, even though we watch her drink almost every scene she's in. And Stanley is just openly saying, wow, we're drinking a lot of liquor in this house. You want some? You know, just kind of throwing it around, taking off his shirt in full ease of drinking.
Oh, sorry. Anyways,
Yeah, we're talking.
I think it's like also very sexualized. Like, Blanche is very dainty with it, and she's very careful about what she does. Like, that's kind of like seductive because she's trying to be the perfect model. And then the opposite end, he's seductive with it by like seeming very masculine and strong, casual. And like it, reading this part, he starts to remove his shirt before she says anything.
Yeah. She's not giving consent to him removing the shirt, although I think the way that it's played in the movie totally works, where she's like, she's not mad about it. You know? Yeah, she kind of walks over to him and like, she gets scared by the cat and immediately grabs his bicep, you know? You remember this part? Yeah, in the movie. The cats yowl outside and she goes, oh, and like grabs onto his bicep.
Absolutely.
So that's so fascinating. That's so interesting that like it's sexualized for both genders, but they have to sort of use alcohol in different ways. I mean, what is it about alcohol that makes that an appropriate symbol for sexuality then? Oh yeah.
Like the illegality of it. Wait, no, this wasn't even very, never mind, I take it back.
Well, I mean, it's like salacious still though, right? Like it's not illegal in the 40s, but it's still like, it's not like proper, you know? And I think you're right, speakeasy is like the mingling of different people.
I think it says a lot about, like, especially with Stanley's example, like masculinity and how it's okay for men to be like indulgent in alcohol and to be like out there with it. But, and I like the point earlier about like how women are, like, it's kind of a way of flirting that they're, especially Blanche, like refusing the alcohol or being like, secretive with it, because like it almost shows like it almost like tells the men that they're kind of playing hard to get, like they're not going to give in, but really they are. And it's kind of like, I don't know, there's that difference there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like about losing inhibitions, right? And so with Brooklyn's point, if women are supposed to be the gatekeepers in relationships, have you heard that term, gatekeepers, when you're talking about? Okay, so women are supposed to be the one who constantly say no, 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 even if they do have their own desires, right? Which Blanche clearly does. Then it makes sense for them to need to be secretive then about getting rid of those inhibitions, but they still have to play that game. Yeah. I like the word indulgent too, that was a great word.
I think it also kind of shows off like how it's like when men have it, it does take away their inhibitions, but it like kind of shows off like the raw strength of them and like how much they can like, how much alcohol they can have before they like pass out, and it like, I don't know, kind of shows off like, oh wow, like I'm abusing my wife, like I'm like really strong. And then when a woman has alcohol, it's like she becomes like weaker, and like men can like control them better. And so I feel like women sometimes had to like hide that they were drinking alcohol, but they still did it. And then men, it was like a show of strength.
With Stella, anytime she's like on the moon, she's like, oh no, one's the limit, three's the limit, oh I can't go more than that. Whereas Stanley and like his buddies, like they'll like outright drink like 2 cases of beer and still feel like they'd probably still drink more. And so like kind of to Alan's it's kind of like show, oh I'm a man, I'm strong, I can drink a lot of beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also in that scene where they're drinking at the poker party, like it also allows men in the end to show their softer side, which I think is interesting. Like it's when he's at his most drunk that he's like his most pathetic, and he's like, they wash him off in the shower, and that seems like a very, like erotic scene in some ways, you know, they're washing him off, the shirt is like ripped and whatever, and then he's down on the street and he's screaming, Stella, like, I'm so sorry, baby, right? And so like, it also then gives women and men a chance also to flip those roles sometimes, where the women can be loud and tell people to stop playing their music, and they can be assertive, and then the men can also be like soft and vulnerable. So it's kind of has a double effect to it.
It allows them to get it something.
Yeah, because it breaks down, I mean, one of their topics here too is like breaking down barriers. Maybe it breaks down some of the barriers between the genders, even as it heightens them at the same time too. Let's do one more little topic before we go. Let's not end with alcoholism.
Are the differences between classes what makes Stanley a villain in this play?
The differences in the classes, like he gets so into that, like especially with gender roles, because he feels like his gender role and his masculinity is something he can control, whereas like he gets really angry whenever like anyone calls him like Pollock or like suggests that he's like less than this strong white man or whatever, but he so I think that is what kind of drives him to like act more in violence, because he's just so in denial. So he's kind of like
It's interesting that that's how he sees his way to being an American too. Like very like I'm not a Pollock, I'm an American. And you can see that I'm American through these acts of violence and these acts of like male violence, because that proves to you that I'm just as good as all you other white male Americans. With that question, I want to point us to one other part that I just think is very interesting in scenes 1 and 2. Stanley is terrified of getting swindled. So go to page 33. And I think this speaks to when you guys were talking about the Napoleonic Code, because it's like he knows this rule and he knows all the rules like pretty carefully, and this shows like his like insecurities in some way. And he says on page 33, he says, all right, I'll wait till she gets through soaking in a hot tub, and then I'll inquire if she is acquainted with the Napoleonic Code. It looks to me like you have been swindled, baby, and when you're swindled under the Napoleonic Code, I'm swindled too, and I don't like to be swindled. And then go to page 39. And this is where he says something like, I know you're fishing for a compliment. I don't do that. I have not known a woman yet who doesn't know her own beauty, right? And he says, she says, I'm the glamorous type. I'm the glamorous type. And I said, so what? And I says, and what did you say then? And Stanley says, she didn't say nothing. That shut her up like a clam. And Blanche says, did it end the romance? And Stanley says, it ended the conversation. That was all. Some men are took in by this Hollywood glamour stuff and some men are not. So it's like he prides himself on being able to see through any kind of swindles. He believes that I can get at the real of people and the authentic of people. But do you remember this scene, how Blanche is just like playing him the whole time? Like she's just like, you know, grabs his arm and says like, I don't know, it's throughout the whole thing. Like she's just sort of like playing the weak little woman, and he gets taken in by it for a little while, and then at the very end, he's like, no, I'm on to you. Like, what does that reveal about Stanley? Do you think this kind of idea of swindled and his class, to go back to Ali Rose's question? He wants to be, yeah, but it's like every time he knows something, he also knows underneath it all that he like doesn't know anything. It's like he's always afraid that somebody else is gonna know more than him. You know, like if you're in competition with everyone, someone's always gonna be better than you. Sad to be a man. We can say that because Sam's not here. Yeah.
Also kind of like that, it's obvious that he's like a poor white male. And so the fact that he's poor kind of like plays into the fact that into like how he doesn't want to be swindled, because like he already doesn't have a lot to his name. Like the most he probably has is the bell rep.
Yeah.
Whatever Stella had. And so he doesn't want to get swindled because like he already doesn't have a lot, and he doesn't like want to lose more. because
Yeah.
More possessions equals more masculinity.
Absolutely. Good place to end. Okay, Ella.